Presentation that me and Paul Yao have worked with, but I will mix that with some of my personal experiences also. Paul was a guest researcher at KTH, Royal Institute of Technology, last year. So we did this literature review and we created a framework. It will be published in Evaluation of Human Work in March this year, I think. I should also tell you that I have a background. I've been working at the car manufacturer Saab instead of Volvo. Well, I've been working a little bit with studies at Volvo, but unfortunately, Saab is not still a car manufacturer. I'm very sorry about that. But anyhow, I have some experience which have a lot of similarities with your Volvo experiences, Ann-Christine. What I will address today is why do we want to integrate ergonomics and quality. I will show you some brief overviews of research on human performance, quality performance, and then research on relationships between ergonomics and quality. I will then go in to look a little bit more about TQM and lean production. And I will then talk about the framework that Paul Yao and I have together proposed for integrating ergonomics and quality. And then I hope that I will be able to present to you one or two case studies in the field. So, from my point of view, it all started doing a study on musculoskeletal problems in chainsaw assembly in the mid-1980s. In that study, we could see a number of difficult problems, ergonomic problems, that the operators complained about and where they got musculoskeletal problems from. But what we could see was also that the same tasks were really the tasks where the quality department complained about. They were identical, the tasks where the ergonomics and the quality problems occurred. So that created my interest for the field, and I started to look into the field, doing some literature reviews and studies and so on, and then continue with special studies in the field. So to share with you some of the studies from literature, we can see that human performance, as we know, is affected by a lot of work environment issues. For example, by temperature. The likelihood of accidents increase with increasing or decreasing temperature. There's an optimum where we function fairly well. And the same goes for handwork, the dexterity, the work pace, and the mental performance. Another well-known figure is this one. This is productivity. And as we can see, there is optimum at a certain temperature. In this case, it happens to read 25 degrees wet bulb temperature for an American adapted population. But anyhow, the point is that if we decrease or increase the temperature by only a few degrees, we can lose perhaps 10% performance with that. This is a study which is relevant for all of us here. What about the ventilation here? This was performed in schools, looking at the outdoor air supply rate. So when the supply rate was 4 liters per person and second, you could see here in the figure that the performance of schoolwork decreased about 10% from the norm performance. But when the supply rate was increased to something around 10 8, 9, 10 liters per second and person, the performance increased by 10% instead. So we can see here also a clear relationship with outdoor air supply and performance. Illumination is, of course, something that is very important. We've heard it earlier today. And this is a collection of a number of studies, an overview of a number of studies, which shows that productivity increases with increased illuminance, and that we can decrease the rejects by increased illuminance. So the line here, the solid line, is an attempt to integrate all these studies that these people have reviewed. I think that this is a nice view. I brought it in because the reference is from 1937, and I like that. People did good research at that time also. We tend to forget about it. And this is about human performance and glare. So when you have a lot of glare, almost horizontal light coming into the eyes, you will lose perhaps 84% of your performance ability. But if you can get it from a 40-degree angle, you only lose 42% of your performance ability. Any reaction? Yes? What? It's hard. Yes. And as ergonomists, we all know that you should never mix blue and red. And why is that? How many can see that this slide is moving? Some of you? And as we know, the problem here with the blue shortwave light and the red long-wave light makes it difficult for the eye to accommodate to one of them, because the image falls in different places on the retina, before or after the retina, in front or behind the retina. So the eye goes a little bit like an old projector, that is trying to get focus from a curved slide. It goes forward and backwards. So we sometimes perceive this as a movement of the slide here. Of course, human performance is affected by noise, distraction, stress reactions, and so on. Accidents may change. The last slide that I will use here to give you an example of this is human performance is affected by the use of gloves. And here we can see some motor tasks, fine motor tasks. And the baseline is the performance that you do when you do not use gloves. And what the picture shows is the increase in time. For example, on the first task, you can see here, the neoprene glove, which is the black one, increases time with 10% in relation to working without gloves. And the bad one, the PVC, increases the time by about 40%. So you can see here that there's a marked difference both between different tasks, depending on what tasks they are, how fine motor tasks they are or not, and it differs between the quality of the gloves. So my question is then to the engineers, which one is the most expensive per hour? Is it the worker or the glove? And that is something that they immediately connect to. Okay, my old favorite car, the Saab here. One When I was working at Saab, I did a study of the relationship between quality and ergonomics. And this was possible by being employed by the company. That meant that I got access to all the data that I needed, as you, Ann-Christine, pointed out. It's very difficult for a researcher coming from the outside to get access to all these figures because they are considered secret. No car manufacturer wants to show the real quality figures. No other manufacturers either, because they don't want to give their competitors an idea of what they have done and so on. In this first study, we saw that the risk of quality problems was about 3 times higher for ergonomically problematic tasks compared to the other tasks. Another way to put that is that 40% of the quality problems were caused by ergonomic problems. We then, in this case, started off by using the ergonomic problems as an input to the quality problems. So we thought that we would reverse that. So we went to Volvo's engine assembly and started the other way around. We asked them, what are the 5 most important quality problems that you have that you haven't solved yet? And we did that in 2 plants. And then we had action groups working with devising actions against these quality problems. And when we then evaluated, we could see that in one plant, 30%, and in the other plant, 60% of the quality problems could be improved with ergonomic improvements. Unfortunately, they changed the quality statistics, so we couldn't make a follow-up of what happened in the end. But still, this is a result that we got. I can also point out one thing about this study which I think has great relevance for what we are discussing here. And I say that in this study we could show a cause-effect relationship between ergonomics and quality. And as you pointed out here earlier when you referred to this study, we could see that bad postures created fatigue, or we can say discomfort in the muscles or in the back or whatever it was. And that created then quality deficiencies. And when we interviewed the assembly workers, they described it as when you start to work in the morning, you're very fresh in your body and you perform the job very well. But it takes you 1 hour or in bad jobs or 2 hours or a little bit more. When you start to feel tiredness in your muscles, you get discomfort, you get slight pain. It's not a musculoskeletal disorder at that stage yet, but it's starting to give them discomfort during the workday. And what they do then is that they take a chance that the job that they've done has good quality. So what I would say is that quality is not one or zero, on and off, because there's a lot of subjective assessments with quality. For example, if you look at the gap between my paper and the part below here, this is a typical thing what assembly workers has to perform. A nice smooth gap. It could be a little bit larger or a little bit smaller, but it should not be angled like this. So, for example, the hood against the body, or the glove compartment lid against the rest of the panel. And when the assembly worker looks at it, he sees that, well, it's not perfect, but I have so much pain now, so I think that this will be okay. So he takes a chance and sends it away, and that's the reason why the errors increase. And the errors, we could see it also, the errors increased during the day. So when they were fresh in the morning, they performed better quality than later during the day, which is also something that we often see. So by that, I mean that we have established a cause-effect relationship between bad quality and bad ergonomics. This is another study that we performed on headlights. And they are headlights for Volvo. It's a sub-manufacturer. And the work tasks were divided with using the ruler method into 7 categories, from a good posture to a very bad posture, a very good to a very bad posture. And the number of quality deficiencies was 10 times higher for tasks with the worst working postures, according to ruler, compared to those with the best working postures. So this is, in fact, the highest figure that we have seen here. Normally, we've seen the figure 3 that we can do, but then I think it's due to that we had 7 levels to assess the postures, and that means that we got a bigger difference between highest and lowest. We have also seen that bad visual control in assembly work and sewing work can cause bad work postures, and there are also many other researchers that have pointed out the same thing. Another area that is quite interesting when we talk about quality and ergonomics is meat cutting. And we were inspired by a French study of meat cutting of geese. That was a study with a company that decided to decrease the work pace because they thought that they've increased the work pace too much when they tried to make the work more rational and save money. So they decided to employ a lot of new meat cutters and decrease the work pace by 40%. And they focused very much on quality, and they focused on yield for the goose liver. You know, goose liver is very expensive. So what happened was that the meat cutters got 5 grams more goose liver per goose after this change. And that extra income was not only enough to pay the new workers that they had employed, but it also increased the profitability of the company. Another study, French study also, they decreased the work pace from 51 ducks to 42 by 18%, and the duck breast weight increased from 331 grams to 358 grams. And the ratio of highest quality increased from 75 to 95%. So imagine a meat cutter has to do very precise quality movements to get out every ounce of meat to do a good quality job. And also there should be no cutting marks or cutting injuries in the duck breasts or whatever it is. In this case, they calculated the income, the increased income to 42 cents per duck, and the costs increased, since they employed more meat cutters, by 6 cents per duck. That means a profit of 0.36 euro per duck, which was a lot. So in this company, they also managed to increase profitability, and the musculoskeletal problems and the tiredness decreased substantially. So meat cutters have a tough working environment, a lot of musculoskeletal disorders, a lot of cutting injuries, accidents. Over the years, the work pace has gone up, been higher and higher, so the work pace is extremely high. And in a Swedish study, that's the occupation which has the highest speed of wrist movements in angular movements. I think something like 35 degrees per second or something like that. So it's a very high work pace there. They have low temperatures. The branch has low profitability, a lot of international competition in Sweden. And very few meat cutters can stay in the occupation to retire. So we have also then, in our study, tried to replicate this, because the Swedish meat industry say that when we present these French studies, they say, okay, but that's France. It doesn't apply to us. We are Swedish, they say. And it's not ducks. We have beef here. So we did a study looking at the influence of work pace. We had three levels of work pace. The baseline was work as usual. Then we had a quality focus with lower work pace, where we emphasized the quality of the work is the most important thing, and a quantity focus with a higher work pace. And what we could see is that the yield, as you see here in green, decreased substantially with a higher work pace. And this is worth a lot of money. So we are about to publish a study on this one. It will soon appear, we hope. Not in an ergonomics journal. We will publish it in Meat Science if they accept it. We are not sure that this is acceptable to their standards or their what they are used to, but we hope so. If not, if they don't accept it, you will see it in an ergonomics journal later on. And also, if we talk about the quality errors, miscuttings and so on, you can see the blue line. We had a lot of variation, so we probably would have needed a little bit bigger study to make smoother figures than we got. But they agree very much, those two graphs here. I also want to share with you another Swedish study. It's performed by Lena Abrahamsson in the north of Sweden in the steelworks. They performed improvements of the work environment, put a substantial amount of money into that. And when they evaluated this, they got results that showed that these investments had been profitable. So then they wanted to know why did it become profitable? What was the reason for that? And the result was that the quality improvements were responsible for 59% of the total profit. Better productivity for 39%, and decreased personnel costs for 2%. So this is, I think, a very important study in the way that it shows that we must not only look into personnel costs, we must look into quality and also productivity. Now I will move a bit further to the next abstraction level, I think. Talk a little bit more about quality. And Colin, you talked about how people perceived the word quality. And when we ask people in the street, they say often that, well, it's, as you pointed out, things should be durable, they should not break, and so on. But the quality movement has developed quite a lot. So one of the definitions, at least the one that we work a lot with in Sweden, is this one: the ability of a product or a service to satisfy the needs and expectations of the customer. So it's developed into a much broader concept. Nowadays, it's also added and rather exceed these expectations, because that will make people surprised and surprised positive to the product or the service that they've received. TQM, as you know, points out customer focus as the most important aspect, also continuous improvement, standardization, participation, process orientation. Customer focus can, according to some studies, improve job satisfaction, feedback, participation, and autonomy. But too strong customer focus may then cause very much increased workload, increased stress on the employees, and time pressure and reduced job satisfaction if it's driven too far. So there's a mixed picture of this aspect. Continuous improvement may result in many improvements of working conditions. We have seen in many international studies that there's a relationship there. Continuous improvement, when it's applied, often shows that 30% of the improvements are really ergonomics improvements. Studies from the US, Japan, Germany, Sweden, and so on. So here is often a good relationship. Improved working conditions result in quality improvements. Quality improvement results in better working conditions. But if we then move to standardization, process orientation, there is a little bit more of a different view here also. Some researchers say that it can result in better ergonomics. Others have pointed out that it can result in only minor changes, mainly order and tidiness. Others say that it results in bureaucracy, more monotonous, repetitive, and rule-based tasks, that it results in more stress, more time pressure, and so on. And others say that standardization is a necessary precondition for learning, participation, and change. So the view is slightly mixed about the concept of standardization, I would say. If you look at participation, it results in better quality, better ergonomics, according to some researchers. Others point out that it contributes to better product and production quality, and it improves motivation. Sometimes, though, it can improve motivation so strongly that it can impair health. People become overcommitted sometimes. So that might be a risk here. What about lean production? Lean production is, as you all know, an interpretation of Toyota production system. I think it's regarded as a fad now in the US. It didn't work as well as people hoped. In Sweden, it is the totally most dominating change concept at the moment. When Lean came to Sweden around 1990, it was introduced in a number of companies and got into a very bad reputation after some 5, 6, 7 years. And it was not heard about so much for a few years. But then there was a second wave of Lean in Sweden, which, for example, the lorry manufacturer Scania has been part of creating that. And that second wave of Lean, to a large extent, has tied Lean production together with the socio-technical traditions that we have in Sweden. So it's when I talk about Lean, I mean that it's the Scandinavian version of Lean that I talk about from that point of view. The basis is reducing resources, creating value for the customers, and improving the operations continuously, for example. It's a philosophy, it has principles, it has a number of tools. You know all of this. We have collected a number and performed a number of empirical studies of Lean in Sweden. Presently, we have data from 115 organizations and 9 projects. We are 17 researchers involved in this from both Stockholm and Linköping. And the total empirical basis is over 5,000 responses from questionnaires, over 400 deep interviews, and over 400 participants in feedback seminars. In addition, then, case studies, interactive research programs, and longitudinal studies. So out of that, I could talk a long time about that, but only to give you a few insights in that, is that there is a big difference between different organizations of how they use Lean, on the goals, on the content, on the way they implement Lean, and also the context, of course. We can see that the work environment improves in some organizations, and it deteriorates in others. We have a program which has focused Lean in manufacturing industries. So out of 60 industries that we followed, we can see that a majority of the employees in the industry consider that the Lean has improved their working conditions. But when we do it in the public sector, a majority of the employees consider the opposite. It has decreased their working conditions, made it worse, made the working conditions worse. And there are also a number of important preconditions here. Strong managerial ownership, a long-term strategy, union participation in improvement activities, and a development-oriented culture. Continuous improvement and developments in the culture, I would say. There are other Swedish studies and reports on Lean that show that there are some positive effects, such as more influence, broader job content, higher involvement in work, job rotation, increased responsibility, teamwork, better work postures, and less heavy lifting. But there are also negative aspects: increased workload, there's more stress, insufficient manning, decreased cycle times, increased monotony, and increased managerial control, overtime, and shift work. So, our conclusion to that is that Lean may increase the risks for musculoskeletal problems, in particular if the focus from the companies are on savings, or on decreased resources, and on using instrumental methods and tools. But we also can see that lean may decrease the risks for musculoskeletal problems if the implementation is combined with high levels of participation, with problem solving, development orientation, improvements, continuous improvement, and also a pronounced focus on health and safety in a broad, multifaceted change program. So, what is important is really the managerial strategies used in this context. Then to the framework that Paul Yao and I have devised. We can see that there are ergonomic concepts, there are quality concepts. Sometimes they are complementary, support one another, and sometimes there are contradictions. And the framework we have proposed has a number of these pairs. The first pair that we want to look at is total quality management versus socio-technical systems approach. And we can see that there is a complementary area. It's easy to integrate TQM in the Scandinavian and perhaps the Japanese traditions with the socio-technical approach. Because the focus is on people and processes, long-term goals, emphasis on teamwork, participation, working conditions, cultures, values, and trust. But the more TQM, according to the American tradition, is what we say a contradictory area. It's difficult to integrate because there can be more a focus on tools, cost reduction tools, short-term results, orientation and controlling the employees rather than empowering them. Of course, I generalize a lot, as you see now, but if we try to make the difference clearer, this is one way. The second pair that we can look at is customer focus versus the ergonomics stakeholder model. Should we emphasize the customer or should we emphasize all stakeholders, the most important stakeholders? So the complementary area would be customer satisfaction can be achieved through employee motivation and involvement and give consideration to all stakeholders. Then there's easy integration. But the difficult integration comes if customer focus gives the highest and very strong priority to the customers in all situations. And in that way gives difficult tasks, difficult situations for the employees. The third example that I will show is quality policy deployment and participatory ergonomics. We can see here that there's a complementary area and easy integration if participative ergonomics and quality policy deployment are integrated. That means that we make use of employee participation in policy deployment. We make use of goal settings and encourage motivation, learning, commitment, and improvement. But the opposite, difficult integration, we can see if there's no challenge to the power structures, if it focuses on only short-term profit, bureaucracy, then it's much more difficult to integrate it. The framework still continues these pairs: quality management system versus psychosocial and organizational factors, process orientation versus systems ergonomics, the concept of zero defects versus system ergonomics, quality value chain versus ergonomic value chains, continuous improvement versus participatory ergonomics, and quality tubes versus ergonomics principles and tools. So I won't have time to go through these, but they will all be in the paper that I just talked about, and the reference is on the last page in this presentation. The idea of using the framework is that we as ergonomists can identify the quality concepts in the organization. We can find the corresponding pair, and then we can see, is it a complementary or a contradictory relationship? If there's a complementary relationship, we can integrate and try to create a development in the organization on that basis. If there are contradictory arrangements, we can either change one of the views, the quality view, we think then. Perhaps it's possible to remove that particular quality view and change it to another, or we can perhaps avoid integration totally. Last, to give you one case study, ISO 9000 was introduced in different ways, with a developmental view, which then shows the example of easy integration, or with a regulatory view, which shows the difficulties in integrating the two concepts. The company that used an integration way, a developmental view, they started off by creating work groups that would go through their working conditions and the problems that they had, and starting a change process, something which was inspired by continuous improvement, to make things work as they wanted things to work. And after that, they wrote their own instructions. They wrote the texts themselves that were included in the ISO 9000. And the manager was very supportive in this way, and said that the important thing is that we get a very structured way of working and good working conditions. If we get the certificate or not, it doesn't matter. But the main thing is that we get the processes running smooth and well in the organization. As you see, there was a lot of participation, and many of the ergonomics concepts were integrated here, and it worked very well in that company. The other company, one of the examples here, the manager said that the most important thing is that we get the certificate to hang in the wall so our visitors can see it. And he employed a consultant who came out, and the consultant went around, asked the people what they were doing, and he wrote all the instructions and handed over a lot of papers to people, say, please follow this. And as we all know, that didn't work. The manager there wanted to use the instructions in a disciplinary way, in a regulatory way, and of course it was deemed on beforehand not to succeed. So these could be two examples of the complementary and the contradictory ways of working with quality and ergonomics. So, to try to sum up this, which reminds of your 4 hypotheses there, we can see from our research that there is a very strong relationship between ergonomics and quality. We have so many studies of that. we can see that ergonomics improvement result in better quality. But we can also see that quality improvements can contribute to better work conditions if performed in the right way. And also, people often say that to be able to perform your work with good quality, that is a very important thing for your own job satisfaction. And finally, the material that I've been talking about is then in the chapter of evaluation of human work that will be out, I think, March or possibly April this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jörgen. We do have a bit of time before the lunch break for questions and comments. Please, somebody from this part of the room, give me a comment. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for a great presentation. I truly enjoyed it. There's so much knowledge in there. It was amazing. I just want to get your take on the couple of slides you had on illuminance. Illuminance, increase illuminance, increases productivity and decrease rejects. So can you comment on the type of illuminance? Because fluorescent light can cause some issues. Even though you may have high level of illuminance, but actually it can make some people very sick, and their productivity can go down, in fact, because of flicker and whatnot.
Yes, of course. It's very much an oversimplification only to use illuminance level, because light has so many other characteristics that are important for the quality of the light. It's reflections, it's glare, it's the color rendering, and so on. And, of course, the adaptation to the task. So I would say that perhaps I was a little bit hesitant to show that slide because of the oversimplification of only using illuminance level of it. But still, I think it's an argument. But when we go deeper into these issues, it's very important. I could give you one example that relates to some of the earlier speakers here. I think it was you, Colin. We looked at the inspection of the painting of cars, of Saab cars. And we did increase the ability for the workers to detect the errors by creating a structure on the wall and then have light that was adapted to that. So it was very easy for the workers to see the dents and to see dirt in the paint and so on. And it improved so much so that they discovered errors on almost every car. And that was too good a result because no customers would ever detect those errors. So instead, the human factors or the ergonomics approach was too effective for what they needed in that case. So they had to decrease a little bit of the settings so that the inspectors only could detect the types of errors that were important for the customers.
Thank you. One question or comment here, please, and then I think we'll break for lunch.
My question is about the. You told us about how they implemented lean in Sweden, and it was like two waves. The first wave was like they were trying to do, I guess, like we did in North America, tool by tool. And the second time is like it's succeeding right now, right? It's better.
It's better. I wouldn't say that it's succeeding because we still see a number of organizations that do it in the wrong way. But the thing is that we see also a number of organizations that do it in a good way.
Okay, but what are the parameters for the one succeeding, you know? It's because they have a socio-tech environment, or they're trying to do it like in a philosophical way? What is the success behind it, do you think?
I think that it is that lean is interpreted in Sweden as a combination between ideas from Toyota and lean, together with a socio-technical background and influence and culture that has been around in Sweden for so many years. So I think it's a combination of these two that is the reason.
Okay, because here in North America, we tend to see it as a set of tools that we need to apply, and usually when you apply them, it takes a couple of time and then you get success. But usually what happens after a couple of months, it falters and success don't follow. But we tend to use it as a tools of having tools and making them work. Don't you think that with ergonomics, that could be like, we could have it as a tool that we could put on beside the lean thing, you know, like a big use the lean as a locomotive and have our own bandwagon as ergonomics tied up to it, and so we could have it as a tools also, so we can succeed at bringing the ergonomics in lean, because I know lean right now is kind of crave. Everywhere you go, people trying to do it. If we could just having our ergonomic stuff, like a tools, could be hooked up with the locomotive, then we're on, you know. People's gonna, what the researchers are giving us today, we could have it applied by it.
I think like you have a very important point of view there. From my point of view, I think that the elegance of lean is that they have so many operational ways of working and tools that can be a support for the managers. And managers often say that this is much of a support for us how to perform our work, which the socio-technical tradition had not, because they were more on an abstract level. So people had to, as managers, devise their own ways of working with it. So I think that there's a great need for more ergonomic tools that can be used. And in Sweden, for example, ergonomic value flow analysis has been developed as one of them. The other thing I would say is that I think that we have left the lean tool version to a large extent in the successful companies. The tools are not so very important. It's more the philosophy, the way of thinking, and the tools are used when they are needed, but they are not by any means something that by themselves are important.
They are not the goals.
Exactly.
The goal is to make
they are means that could be used when they are needed, not otherwise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that important exchange. And let's pick that discussion up again this afternoon. I think Jörgen has raised a number of process level issues around how we tackle this that I think are really important, worth discussing more.